There's a pattern in history that almost no one talks about. A pattern that destroys economies, collapses systems, and reshapes nations. Not war, not famine, not political chaos, demographics. A nation doesn't fall because it grows weaker. It falls because it grows older. And right now, the United States is approaching a demographic cliff so enormous, so unprecedented, that most people can't even comprehend its scale. Not yet. Because the decline of a population doesn't feel like a crisis until the moment it becomes irreversible. This is the story of what happens when an entire generation retires at once. Why the exit of 71 million Americans from the workforce will change the US economy forever. And why the warning signs are already flashing, quietly but unmistakably. To understand the future, you must first understand the math. And the math is brutal. Let's begin at the height of American growth, the moment the engine of the modern US economy was created. Between 1946 and 1964, 71 million baby boomers were born. Hospitals overflowed. Schools were built at a record pace. Suburbs expanded outward into fields and farmland. Every decade the population surged. Every decade the country grew richer, larger, more powerful. The boomers became the biggest workforce in American history. They powered the factories of the 1970s, the corporate expansion of the 1980s, the tech boom of the 1990s. They paid taxes at record levels, purchased homes at record levels, and spent money at record levels. For nearly half a century, the US economy rose on the shoulders of a single generation, not because of policy, not because of innovation, but because of population. A nation is strongest when its working-age population is large, healthy, and growing. The United States had that, in abundance. But here is the paradox. The moment a nation becomes dependent on a large generation, it also becomes vulnerable to that generation's decline, and the decline has already begun. Every single day, 10,000 boomers retire. Every single day, the workforce shrinks. Every single day, the dependency burden rises. The 71 million who built America's prosperity are now leaving it behind. The pattern is not new. It has happened before, and every time the results were catastrophic. Japan, Southern Europe, Russia, China in the coming decades. Each nation followed the same demographic sequence. A large generation ages, birth rates fall, the workforce collapses, economic stagnation follows, debt rises to compensate, and eventually the system breaks under its own weight. This is the pattern the United States is now repeating. But with one critical difference: the scale. Japan's aging crisis hit a population of 123 million. Europe's crisis hit a continent of 500 million. But the US aging crisis involves the largest retiring workforce in human history. The consequences will reach every industry, every household, every generation. Let's break it down. When boomers retire, the first shock hits the labour market. They leave jobs that younger generations cannot fill fast enough: skilled trades, healthcare, construction, manufacturing, engineering, public service. These roles took decades to master, decades to refine, decades to replace. But time has run out. You can already see the strain. Airports without enough controllers, hospitals without enough nurses, construction companies without enough electricians or plumbers, police departments with shrinking recruiting pools, schools with teacher shortages, government offices that can't hire fast enough. The workforce wasn't built to replace 71 million people. It can't. Not quickly, not fully, not at the scale required. The second shock hit Social Security and Medicare. For decades, the system worked because the base was wide. Many workers supporting fewer retirees, taxes flowing in, benefits flowing out. But a demographic inversion flips the model upside down. Fewer workers, more retirees, more healthcare demand, more long-term care, more disability claims, more end-of-life expenses. Social Security is projected to face shortfalls within years, not decades. Medicare even sooner. You cannot fund 71 million retirees with a shrinking workforce. The math doesn't allow it. And the third shock hits the economy itself. Retirees spend less. They invest more conservatively. They avoid major purchases, they downsize, they sell assets. They withdraw savings instead of contributing to them. A consumption-based economy slows down. Housing markets shift. Savings markets shake. Entire industries contract. A massive generation leaves the spending phase of life and enters the preservation phase. For a nation built on consumer spending, this is not a slowdown, it's a structural shift. The fourth shock hits healthcare. As longevity increases, medical costs explode. Boomers will live longer than any generation before them, but not necessarily healthier. Chronic illness, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, long-term care, assisted living, home health needs, care costs grow exponentially with age, but the healthcare workforce is shrinking. The burden falls on fewer workers, fewer nurses, fewer doctors, fewer caregivers, and the nation is unprepared, not because it doesn't see the crisis, but because the crisis moves slowly, quietly, invisibly, until the moment it becomes unmanageable. We've seen this pattern before. In Japan, the aging crisis began in the late 1990s. The economy stalled, growth flatlined. A nation that once seemed unstoppable entered a 25-year stagnation, not because of bad policy, not because of global competition, but because the population aged faster than it could recover. Southern Europe followed the same trajectory. Italy, Spain, Greece, low birth rates, high life expectancy, shrinking workforces, rising debt, institutions strained to the limit. The United States has avoided this fate, until now. Because while other nations aged earlier, America is aging bigger. The boomer retirement is not a wave. It is a demographic tsunami. It is slow motion but unstoppable, predictable but irreversible, quiet but devastating, and it exposes the single greatest structural weakness in the US economy. America no longer has enough young people to replace the old. Birth rates have fallen for 14 straight years. Housing is unaffordable for young families. Healthcare is expensive. Childcare costs exceed mortgage costs. Student debt delays marriage and parenthood. The average age of first-time mothers is rising. The number of siblings per household is shrinking. The pipeline that once replenished the workforce has collapsed. You cannot run a 21st century economy with a 20th century population model. The math simply doesn't work. And here's the most dangerous part. The demographic decline is permanent. Even if birth rates doubled overnight, it would take 20 years for those children to enter the workforce. But the boomer exit is happening now. You cannot replace retirees with newborns. You cannot replace decades of expertise with policy slogans. You cannot replace lost workers with time. Time is the one resource America no longer has. So what happens next? The first stage is labor scarcity. Wages rise, but so do prices. Inflation becomes structural, not temporary. Employers automate. Industries consolidate. Small businesses struggle. Growth slows. The second stage is fiscal strain. Social security shortfalls. Medicare insolvency. Higher taxes. Lower benefits. Rising debt to cover the gap. Bond markets react. Interest payments explode. The third stage is intergenerational conflict. Younger workers paying more but getting less. Older generations demanding benefits they were promised. A political divide deepening not by ideology, but by age. The fourth stage is economic contraction. Fewer workers, less output, less innovation, less consumption, less growth. A nation designed for expansion enters mathematical decline. The fifth stage is institutional instability. Schools close, hospitals face capacity collapse, retirement communities overflow, cities lose tax revenue, states fight for workers, infrastructure decays. This is the demographic cycle, predictable, documented, inevitable. And the United States is entering the steepest part of the curve. But the collapse is not guaranteed. History shows that nations can respond to demographic decline, if they act early enough. The solutions exist, but each one carries risks. One path is immigration expansion, a rapid increase in young workers to offset retirements. But immigration is politically divisive, and integrating millions at once strains systems already under pressure. Another path is radical automation. AI replacing white-collar labor, robots replacing blue-collar labor, automation becoming the primary engine of productivity. But automation reallocates wealth upward, and it risks creating a different kind of instability. A third path is pro-natalist policy, paying families to have children, subsidizing housing, offering free childcare, encouraging population growth. But even if successful, results arrive too late for the boomer cliff. A fourth path is delayed retirement, keeping boomers in the workforce longer, but health declines. Aging bodies cannot fill every job, and older workers often face age discrimination. A fifth path is system restructuring, rewriting Social Security, redesigning Medicare, changing retirement ages, adjusting benefits. But these reforms require political will and political risk. Every option carries consequences. Every option creates winners and losers. Every option forces a choice between discomfort now and crisis later. But the choice cannot be avoided forever. The demographic clock runs forward, never backward, and the United States is running out of time. The boomer generation transformed America during its rise. It will transform America again during its decline. The schools they filled are now closing. The suburbs they built are aging. The homes they bought are being sold. The wealth they accumulated is shifting. The institutions they funded are collapsing. The workforce they powered is evaporating. The nation they built is entering a new era, an era defined not by growth, but by scarcity. The question is not whether the boomer retirement will reshape the future. It already is. The signs are everywhere. Longer wait times at hospitals, shortages in skilled trades, a shrinking pool of caregivers, labour shortages across essential sectors, rising inflation rooted in labour scarcity, Social Security debates intensifying, Medicare costs spiralling. This is not coincidence. It is demography, and demography is destiny. The United States stands at the edge of a demographic cliff. Below lies a future shaped by fewer workers, more retirees, and rising economic pressure. Above lies the possibility of adaptation, if the nation acts before the tipping point. But the window is closing, fast. So the question becomes, how does a country built on the energy of its largest generation survive the moment that generation steps away? What happens when the economic engine that powered America for half a century powers down? What happens when a nation designed for population expansion enters a permanent contraction? What happens when 71 million people retire, and the world built around them is no longer prepared to hold their weight? The math is in motion, the consequences are converging, and the clock is ticking. The only question left, the question that will define the next century of American life, is this. What happens to a nation when its greatest generation becomes its greatest vulnerability?